Hey everyone, Steven here, and welcome to my little library of horrors. So, after my last read being really heavy content-wise and genuinely being pretty soul-crushing, I felt like I really needed to just kind of take a break from the horror genre as a whole, which I tend to do now and again, give myself a bit of a palate cleanser and kind of just see what else is out there. So, every once in a while, like I usually say, there comes a book where it just immediately catches my eye, and I have to know what it's about. If you've watched my review of Tom Robbins' Another Roadside Attraction, that's exactly how I discovered that book. Was the title, the cover was ridiculous, and the premise sounded completely outrageous. And, I just had to see what it was about. And it turned out to be honestly one of the best books I've ever read in my life. I loved it. Definitely check out that review if you want a little bit more about it. But anyway, as I was sort of, browsing a little bit, doing some book shopping, there was a book that definitely caught my eye because, again, the cover was just very bright, colorful, and just kind of weird, to be totally honest. So I picked it up. The title itself didn't really have any inkling one way or the other, but it was the premise when I read the back of the book that instantly made me buy this book and have to read it. And that book is Wilt by Tom Sharp. And it's actually one of those books that has those wraparound covers here. So, what is Wilt about? Wilt is the story of a 34-year-old man named Henry Wilt, who is basically a disgruntled English professor over in England who has basically reached the end of his rope with life, essentially. He's bitter, he's angry, he's essentially a Squidward, if you will. Or if you've ever seen the movie Falling Down, that's kind of like how this story kind of starts. Um, so yeah, like I said, Wilt is an English professor who pretty much spends his nights getting drunk and has fantasies of murdering his wife. So one night after Wilt and his wife go to a party at this couple's house that his wife met, he ends up in a pretty peculiar predicament where he gets walked in on basically in having intercourse with a sex doll, but it's not as simple as that. I really don't want to give out more details than that because I feel like it'll kind of spoil the story a little bit. But after that being his breaking point, he then suddenly develops the plot on how he's going to carry out the murder of his wife Ava. So as he disposes of the doll, his wife actually goes missing. And all of a sudden, Wilt finds himself the prime suspect of his wife's presumed murder. And the story sort of unfolds about, how people can become the victims of circumstance. And overall, it was an interesting story. It's interesting because we get to see Ava and Wilt's dynamic. Ava is this very. It's difficult because the book constantly puts Ava down as this fat, stupid woman. But I don't get that from her. With Ava, Wilt's frustration with her is she seems to have this fascination with this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. I have to put my all into this, into this, into this. This is the direction I want. And for Wilt, that's frustrating, that she seems to lack an identity. But when we get Ava's side of the story, I can't help but kind of feel for her. She has sort of fallen into this role of being a housewife and not really knowing who she is. She has no idea who she is, and that is a big basis of Ava and Wilt's relationship in the book, is they have both fallen into routine, like a lot of marriages do. And, it builds resentment towards them. However, on the opposite side of that same coin, I can also resonate with Wilt a bit, where, you... Oh, sorry, there's a woodpecker at my window. Oh my gosh. I'll see if I can show you guys it really quick. I don't know if you can see it over there. No, he just flew away. But yeah, you can see the bit of a disaster my library is right now, but what can you do? But anyway, excuse me. Yeah, I can sort of feel for Wilt in a way, when you feel trapped in sort of less than what you feel you're capable of. Wilt really wants to be the head of his department, and he tries really hard to get his students invested in learning about literature and how a lot of stories coincide with real life problems. However, for Wilt, a lot of his classes are blue collar, essentially. And I don't want to say blue collar people are, not interested in reading or stories or things like that. That's not fair. That's a massive generalization. However, I also kind of feel like that is kind of true. People who tend to work more blue collar jobs don't... it's hard for me to say. Like I said, I don't want to sort of put this label on people because, not everybody's the same, even if you do work whatever job you work. But in the case of this story, his students have absolutely no interest in this. They believe in the hard reality of life. You get a job, you do what you do, and you make the best of what you have. And it's very defeating for Wilt, to where he just essentially kind of throws a book out there and says, here, read this, do whatever the hell you want. So anyway, one day, Ava, while she's out doing something, she runs into this very spontaneous woman. Gosh, I can't remember her name. What was it? Oh, maybe it's right on the back here. No, I don't think it is. I can't remember her name. Sally, that's her name. Sally Pringsheim. And the story was written in the 70s, so Sally is this essentially hippie from America that is over in the UK and is very much about women's liberation. And, she starts to kind of befriend Ava, getting her to try to help discover her own strength as a woman. And, obviously I support that completely. However, as the story goes on, we start to see more of Sally's personality and true self kind of shine through the cracks, if you will, where all of this, it's like the women's liberation she seeks is through the putting down of men, how all of, I'll explain it later, but essentially she's very much, women power. And again, cool, all about that. So Sally invites Ava and Wilt. I'm sorry, his name isn't Wilt. His name is Henry. I have to remember that. Their last name is Wilt. But Ava and Henry get invited to Sally and her husband's party, essentially. So, Henry reluctantly agrees to go. He hates going. And that's sort of that's when we get introduced to Sally's husband, who is, again, I have to look up his name. She calls him G Baby, so I know his name starts with a G. And I want to say it's like, gosh, I can't remember. Is it like Glaskin? It's something, but I can't remember off the top of my head. Gaskell, that's his name, Gaskell. Who happens to be some kind of physicist, I believe, or scientist in a way. Very rich, of course, and all of that. So after the whole incident with the doll and Henry, Ava decides that she's going to leave with the Pringheims on a bit of an adventure. You know, she doesn't tell Henry where she's going. And what happens is that Ava and the Pringheims end up sort of getting shipwrecked, essentially. Their boat gets stuck on this muddy dune that, you know, has nowhere to go. And so a lot of Ava's part in the story is, you know, her being stranded on this boat with the Pringheims. And that's when we start to see the Pringheims dynamic together. And it's crazy. Like, you slowly start to see the unraveling of sort of the mask they wear for the public. And they're not, I don't want to say they're not great people, but they're very, very broken people, essentially. And, you know, that's when their secrets start to come out. And it's just like, whoa, what? What? Like, okay, this is kind of crazy. And, you know, and that was honestly probably the best part of the story for me was, you know, sort of seeing that seemingly perfect couple start to unravel and the cracks seep through. And it was just awesome. Like, I really enjoyed that. But while that's happening, that's where we sort of, you know, we also follow where Henry is. Essentially, his plan wasn't flawless, and it's so wonderful. Again, the author really hammers home the victim of coincidence kind of thing, where seemingly innocuous decisions lead to these ultimate consequences, you know. You know, as Henry has seemingly practiced and plotted the perfect murder, one small thing links him to that happening, you know. I'll gently give how he does it. He essentially shoves the doll down into this hole in the ground. The college that he teaches at, the university he teaches at, is building a whole separate building to sort of expand their liberal studies program that the university is desperately trying to get approved by the board of committee. So he ends up shoving the doll down there, thinking he's perfected the ultimate murder. However, the next day when the construction workers go to start back on the project, one of the workers happens to notice the doll down there. However, he doesn't know it's a doll. So immediately, you know, things are going wrong. So that's when all of a sudden we get introduced to Inspector Flint, who is now the lead investigation of this quote-unquote homicide. And that's sort of where Henry spends most of the book, is in the police station, sort of playing this Hannibal Lecter-esque character where he taunts the police constantly because he knows he's innocent. He's done nothing wrong. However, on the same hand, he has no idea where his wife is. So while he can't tell them where she is, he just decides to, you know, say to hell with it. What's the worst that could happen at this point, you know? And it's really kind of funny to see how Wilt and Inspector Flint play off of each other, you know. Inspector Flint is sort of your typical overzealous detective who is convinced he has his man. There's no way he's, you know, there's no way, you know, Henry isn't guilty. So Henry concocts this complete, you know, he essentially concocts how he did what he did. And it leads Inspector Flint into this massive goose chase. And And yeah, it just kind of, like I said, it kind of leads into this whole goose chase, and seeing Henry just kind of like hang back and sort of enjoy the game he's playing. Another part of the book is sort of focused on the sort of the heads of the universities trying to figure out how they can still get approved for their expansion and the inclusion of a new liberal arts degree that would sort of bring their university into this upper echelon. I'm not sure what the term was, but they're sort of trying to juggle how they can still do that while essentially having unknowingly hired a murderer. And it was really interesting because as much as I don't like politics and I hate to even bring them up, it's funny to see, like, as much as how heavily political our society is today, a lot of people seem to think that wasn't the case back then. I think this book kind of, proves that wrong, in that I think society has always been sort of heavily political. It's just, it wasn't as easy to get your opinion out there. If you wanted to know, you had to pick up a book and read it, that someone wrote it. Now you can just go on Facebook and just type whatever you feel, and that's it. So, but I think it's funny that the author sort of pokes fun at it, between the two parties, that, they're arguing this, they're arguing that. But when this one point comes up that harms both of them, both parties sweep it under the rug and agree to move on. And it's like, it sort of aligns with my own views on everything, But again, I don't want to delve into all of that. It's just, it was an interesting part of the story. So as we start to reach the climax of the story, Ava essentially decides, she needs to get help and to get back home to Henry. And this leads to this just totally goofy chain of events. And it again, I think Ava's part in the story really helps make the story overall interesting. Like I said, as much as I enjoy Henry's part in the police station, it just kind of gets boring, hearing a bunch of dialogue back and forth. Henry's not going anywhere. He hasn't moved anywhere. He has there's seemingly no moving pieces until near the climax of the story with him. So yeah, Ava goes out to try and find help and get back home to Henry. And then again, that's really when the story, like, genuinely starts to pick up, because there's so many, like, things that are, like, this close to kind of tying things together. But then again, this event of coincidence happens that prevents it from happening. So, but that's when it genuinely, I was like, okay, I gotta go. I have to see how does this end. But yeah, the ending of the story actually has a pretty sweet ending, if I'm going to be honest. I won't completely give it away, but Ava and Henry sort of reconciliate. I think the time apart that they had made them realize that, they do care for each other and they do love each other. And while it's easy to sort of build this resentment towards your partner after you've fallen into, such a routine after a few years, I think, it's important to just take the time to step back and maybe take a break from each other for a little while, and see if that resentment is to the core, or if it's you being a victim of circumstance at the point, But, and then, like I said, that's not even, like, the overall best part of the ending. I won't give that away because it's, like I said, it's really sweet. It was really nice. I enjoyed the ending of the story, and I think it really rounded out the whole thing pretty well. So yeah. What am I going to rate Wilt? honestly, I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 5. There's definitely some laugh out loud moments. I love Henry's, like, dark humor. It's in his bluntness. It really comes off just... The timing's funny. Like I said, the timing is really, really done well with the comedy. Because this is a comedy. And I just, like I said, I really enjoyed it. I think the comedy was done well. I enjoy Henry's character. I enjoyed, sort of the antics the Pringsheims and Ava get into. However, I do wish that Henry had a little bit more going on with his side of the story. I think when he's concocting that sort of false plan that he's describing to Inspector Flint, I think it would have been interesting to have Inspector Flint take Henry with him to the locations of, what his plans are. And I think that would have offered a much better sort of Tom and Jerry-esque back and forth between Henry and Flint. Instead of just having Henry constantly sitting in an interrogation room and Inspector Flint getting increasingly frustrated with, Henry's sort of nonchalantness. But yeah, so while Henry and Ava have a happy ending, I unfortunately, I guess, can't say the same for my own marriage. Sorry. Come on. My wife and I are divorcing. Fuck. Sorry, need a minute. So, yeah. Kind of entering this new chapter in my life now, and, I'm not gonna lie, it's scary. It's pretty scary, and, yeah, I'm still kind of like, processing everything, and, just trying to be strong, and, I'm taking the time to discover myself, I've been in a relationship my entire adult life, since I was like 23, so I think I've always kind of spent so much time, as a teenager being depressed and convinced I wasn't going to make it past 30, to always sort of being a partner, a dad, and yeah, so now it's going to be time for me to find out who I am now, Like I said, it's scary and terrifying, but I guess I'm also kind of excited, I have to go and discover who I am. And but I feel like I kind of already got a good feeling on who I am, I'm a really good dad. I'm a booktuber. I'm a reader. I'm a writer. And I think that's some pretty solid grounding so far for having to start my life over at 37 years old. But, I just kind of had to get that off my chest, And I'm sorry if this kind of just brings the mood down, but, this channel started off as just me wanting to record this massive book haul that I got from my friends because I didn't want to post 70, 80 pictures on Facebook to show. And it's kind of, I think it's really helped me find myself these past 2 years. And, it's kind of crazy. I'm almost at 550 subscribers now. And to think and I'm sure that's minuscule to a lot of people, but sit 550 people down in a room to watch you talk about something, that feels really good. And I'm not used to feeling good about myself and things that I create. So things are going to be hard for a little while. I don't think I'll take a break from the channel, to be honest. I think it'll be healthy for me to have this to sort of look forward to and continue to move on with my life. But yeah, if you've made it this far, I really appreciate it. And if you haven't, that's okay too. I appreciate a little bit of your time today. And if you're watching this and you're going through the same thing, you're not alone. I'm here, and I feel for you. And it may be the end of a chapter for us, but it's not the end of our story. And I really hope that with this new blank page that you and I have, just water, I promise. I hope with this brand new page that you and I are faced with, we both learn to create something beautiful with it. Until next time, everyone, be kind to yourselves. Later.